Let's look at the words that can be used in place of the words used in direct speech when being written in its indirect speech. So for imperative sentences are orders, requests, advices or suggestions. So the most commonly used words to join clauses together are ordered, requested. If it's an order, you would say ordered. If it was a request, you would use the word requested to join the clause. If it's an advice, you would say advised. For suggestion, you would say suggested. But for negative, for any of these, if they're not supposed to be doing it, that's how the sentence is constructed, you would use forbid or forbade, or the plural form of forbid, right? So for, we've seen order, request, advice and suggestion. So never, what would the reporting verb in its indirect form be? Be told, advised or forbade. Again, you don't need to use the word not, not after forbid. Forbid itself means no. Otherwise, for told and advice, you have to use the word not. He was advised not to get wet as he was sick. He was told not to go to school. So, right, if it's direction, it will be directed. Warning, warn. If the person is addressed directly, you would use the word called. That would be the reporting speech. Let's look at exclamatory sentences. Now, exclamatory sentences are used to express emotions. Interjections like hurrah, wow, alas, oh, ah are such words that express emotion. In such cases, you have to use the word that to join the clause. Let's look at a few rules for exclamatory sentences. Exclamatory sentences change to assertive sentences and interjections are removed. When you have an exclamation mark in the direct speech, it will be removed and you have to put a full stop in the indirect speech sentence. For WH words like what and how, right? Such words are removed and before the adjective of this reported speech, we put very. So if the directed speech has words like what and how, in its indirect speech form, you remove them and before the adjective, you put the word very. And then you change the tense, pronouns and the adjectives, whatever are in the sentence according to the rules we've just followed. So when you say change an exclamatory sentence into an assertive sentence, what is an assertive sentence? It's a declarative sentence. You are making a statement, right? So an exclamatory sentence has to be changed into a declarative or a assertive sentence. That means you are making a statement. Let's look at the modes and how they would change it to in their indirect form. If there is sorrow in the speech, you will say exclaimed with sorrow, exclaimed with grief, or exclaimed sorrowfully or cried out. If there is happiness in the speech, in the reported speech, you would say exclaimed with joy, delight, exclaimed joyfully. If there is surprise in the reported speech, you would say exclaimed with surprise, exclaimed with wonder, exclaimed with astonishment. If there is appreciation and it's being expressed strongly, you would say he was applauded for his bravery. Right? So those are the reporting verbs you would use for indirect sentences. Let's look at interrogative sentences. These are all again questionable sentences like who, where, what, when, how, etc. So if the reporting verb has, the word said or said to, you would change it to asked, inquired, or demanded. If the sentence begins with an auxiliary verb for a joining clause, the joining clause should be either if or whether. This is just a recap of what we've just learned. If the sentence begins with a WH question, right, then you don't have to use a conjunction because this WH question itself is the joining clause. When you have a question mark, it will change to a full stop. When you have sentences that are expressed in a positive feeling, remove do or does. You should not write those words. If no is used in the interrogative sentence and you have to change do or does to the verb did. If it has did or has or have, it will change to had, had. These are your helping verbs. Let's look at statements when there is the presence of a pronoun. The first person of the reported speech changes according to the subject of the reporting speech. So the statement is, she said, I am in 9th class. So you would say, she says that she was in 9th class. So according to the subject, here it is in third person form. I'm sorry. So here the person is in their third person form. Hence you're saying you are changing. She says that she was in 9th class. The presence of a second person, right? It will then change according to the object of the reporting speech. He says to them, you have completed your job. So the indirect statement would become, he tells them that they have completed their job. So it will change according to the object of the reporting speech. If there is a third person in the reported speech, it does not change. So the direct statement is, he says she is in 10th class. The indirect speech will become, he says that she is in 10th class. When it comes to place and time, words expressing nearness in time or place in direct speech are generally changed into words expressing distance in indirect speech. So these are two different tables. Let's look at the one on the left. So if you have the word here in direct speech, it will change to there. Today, that day. This morning, that morning. Yesterday will change to the day before. Tomorrow will always be mentioned as the next day in indirect speech. Next week would become the following week. Next month would become the following month. If there is the verb now, it will change to then. If you have the usage of ago, you have to change it to before in indirect speech. Thus would become so. Last night becomes the night before. This becomes that. These becomes those. Hither becomes thither. Hence becomes thence. Come becomes go. So you have to remember the table for the following words. They need to be changed into their respective indirect speech word. Example. In the direct sentence form, the example says, she said, my father came yesterday. So the indirect speech would become, she said that her father had come the day before. Right? Yesterday becomes the day before. She says, my father came yesterday. She says that her father had come yesterday because the reporting verb says is in its present tense, right? Or even if you use future tense for will say. In such cases, the term expression yesterday, it will not change. Because if you look at this example, it's already in the past. Hence, you can change it. But if it's in its present tense or in the future tense, yesterday will remain the same. It will not change. Let's look at punctuations. So the words that are actually spoken should be enclosed in quotes and begin with a capital letter. Example, he said, you are right. Comma, full stop, question mark or exclamation mark must be present at the end of the reported sentence and are placed inside the closing inverted commas. Never put the punctuation mark, either a comma or a full stop or a question mark in outside the inverted commas. It should always be inside the quotation marks. If the direct speech comes after the information about who is speaking, comma is used to introduce the piece of speech. In direct speech, right? So before the inverted commas begin, you have to use the comma. And it should be before the first inverted comma. She shouted, stop talking. Thinking back, she said, he didn't expect to win. So comma is used to separate two reported speech and no capital letter should begin for the second sentence.